It's time for dinner.
Ding dong, ding dong, ding dong.
From the creative mind of Scott Bertelson, after 4 decades of teaching our impressionable youth,
The dinner bell.
you are invited to enjoy conversational morsels for the mind at Mr. B's dinner party.
Yeah, dinner.
Hello out there in podcast land. Oh yes, it's time again for another episode of Mr. B's Dinner Party. I hope that you have a hearty appetite, because today I have brought a friend to the table. Oh yes, and I think you're going to thoroughly enjoy listening to what he's got to say about our lovely North Iowa area. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce to you Mr. Riley Lewis. Hello, Mr. Lewis.
Good morning. Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
You can call it whatever
Yeah.
you want.
This is a new experience for me. So let's hope we do well.
And if it's not, since you're not being paid, nor am I, what does it matter?
That's correct. That's correct.
But anyway, Riley, as I said to you before we started recording, the reason I wanted to ask you to be one of my guests is that you have a rich knowledge of some of the history of Winnebago County, especially your family. So I was hoping you could start talking about your family,
Okay.
first of all.
Okay. Our family started back in 1871 when my great-grandfather came from Sweden. They did not, the King of Sweden would tell you how to worship, and they heard about America, and they heard that the Civil War was done, and so they came over on a ship. They eventually got to Osage, and then they actually come to Forest City in 1871. They purchased their first 16 acres of ground in 1878, which we still farm today. My son Todd farms that, and so we still have that in our land. My parents have passed away, and so Todd and I'm going to start all over again.
Of course.
Just
start.
yeah. And so they came to Forest City and settled there, and brought a lot of Swedes with them.
Okay.
And they liked the freedoms of America. They were in Mount Valley. Mount Valley was mostly a Norwegian-speaking township, and so the Swedes coming in kind of mixed things up a little bit. And so they set out, and we've all been farmers. I'm the 4th generation farming. Todd is the 5th, and Ellie and Noah are coming along, our seniors this year, and hopefully one of them are going to be the 6th generation of actual dirt under the fingernails farming in our area. So I'm married to Chris, been married 51 years, and we have Todd as a son and Ellie. No. We have Todd as a son and Carrie, who is in Des Moines with the Des Moines Waterworks and does work down there. So we have 4 grandchildren, and we're enjoying our retirement very much.
I bet you are. Wow. So you do have some deep roots here, don't you?
I do.
Oh,
Yep.
my goodness.
Yep.
So tell me what it was like when you when you were farming. How many acres did you have? What did you raise?
This year we have about 1,800 acres.
Oh my goodness.
And it's split half and half with corn and beans. And we also raise hogs for Christensen Farms. We raise about close to 8,000 head of hogs for them a year. And so that's basically keeps us and Todd and 2 full-time hired help guys to keep all that going. So,
oh my goodness. That's a lot of hogs.
yeah, it is. But I'll tell you what they produce is good eating, and what they produce otherwise makes some excellent fertilizer on the land. We're truly organic. When you don't have to use commercial fertilizer and can use the liquid manure off of the hogs going into the crops, and it basically uses itself within a year's time. So it's basically an organic type fertilizer program for the farm.
Mm-hmm. So when you were a farmer then, did you also raise hogs at that time when you were actively farming?
Yes. I've been, the first hogs that I rose was in when I was 12 years old.
Oh my goodness.
And I went to the Winnebago County Fair. And aside from the military, being out of the hogs and then coming back and getting them, I basically have had hogs on the farm for probably 55 to 60 years.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. And how did you raise those hogs in the so-called early days?
Early days, they were in a barn.
Yes.
And the chores that I had to do in order for me to go to town on Saturday and play basketball at the Civic Auditorium, I had to clean out the hog pens with a pitchfork and either throw it in the carrier or throw it out on the feeding floor. And when I came back from the Army, that's the way we started out. And then we kind of looked at the confinement hog houses and seen the advantage of them, like a day today when it's minus 15 and it's 70 degrees in those hog barns, and they're enjoying life, and the chores are easier and that. And so we converted over to them about 30 years ago is when we built our first confinement barn.
And that would really be a much more efficient way. That was raising that many hogs.
That's correct.
Yes.
I mean, everything is contained, and I've had tours go through the farm. Winnebago had gone through, and we always worry about people about animal rights and that. And I asked them to go through there was probably 8 of them that went through, and I says, if you see any animal that's stressed or anything that we should be aware of, so let us know. And they went through, and I told them, I said that one lady came up after the tour, and she says, Mr. Lewis, she says, we appreciate, she was from California, she said, we appreciate the way you raise hogs. She says, in fact, your hogs have it better than a lot of people. And I thought, okay, what are you talking about here? And she says, do you know that your hogs are in an environment of 70 degrees year round? When it gets 90 degrees, they get showers every 15 minutes on the hour that they can cool off. They have somebody looking at them twice a day. And so she says, how many people in the world have that availability to have that kind of care when it's cold outside or when it's hot? It's a much better environment for the hogs today than it was 30, 40, 50 years ago, where they would pile on each other, and it was a lot harder to raise. So this is a nice way to do it.
That's for sure. Not that you're that interested, Riley, but I grew up on the farm, and we had a hog house. That's what we called it. House. And then this was all prior to confinement, of course. And hog houses. Yep. We would put out in the spring and have like a pig farm. I guess that's what I call it, pig city, out in the on so many acres of land, and we would farrow, and that was just the way it was done at that time.
Yep. Yes. And you had to be a good sprinter when you were raising hogs out in the pasture, because when old Ma Sow decided that you were intruding into her ground, you had to find an A house to get on top of her real fast.
That's very true.
Yep.
That's very true. What a temper.
Yep.
What a So you never raised cattle then?
No cattle.
Okay.
No.
Simply a pork man.
Yeah, just pork.
That's perfectly fine. Now, you were visiting with me also, Riley, about how your name had changed.
Yes.
You want to tell us about that, please?
The first, when they came from Sweden, they were Pearsons, P-E-R-S-O-N, like person, but it's Pearson. And when they got to America, my grandfather was born, and they wanted to change their name. And so they did not want to be Swedish. They wanted to be American. And one of the older sisters of my grandfather was going to school and was talking about it with a teacher. And the teacher says, well, how about Lewis? Lewis is an American name. And so he came home, she came home and said that to Mom and Dad. And they decided from there on out it was going to be Lewis, Lewis. And so they just didn't want to be Swedish. They wanted to be American. This was America.
My goodness. Wow. So it's safe to say, Riley, that you have lived here your entire life.
Yep. I was born in the hospital south of the courthouse.
Yes.
Steve Johansson, the attorney in town, and Perry Schroeder from Garner. We were all born within about an hour and 10 minutes of each other in that little hospital, and went to school, graduated high school, went to Waldorf, graduated from Waldorf, and then the Vietnam War was breathing down our neck, and so I was didn't want to do any more than Waldorf, and wanted to start farming.
Yes.
And so I got accepted into the Iowa National Guard for 6 years. So I took my training at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri for 7 months, and came back, and every weekend and 2 weeks, 3 weeks during the summer, trained with the Iowa National Guard.
My gosh. So thank you for your service. That's
Thank you. Thank you very much.
greatly appreciated. So did you ever have a time that you ever thought about leaving the farm, that it was just too much, that you wanted to become a dweller in the city, or not? Or have you always been a country boy?
Yeah, I've always been a country boy, and Dad had a house right south of where they live, and when Chris and I were married, he said, you guys can live there, and
Okay.
and he was kind of getting out of farming, and I was getting in. We had an arrangement to make that switch over, and so it was, I didn't realize the risks when we sat at that table. He says, do you want to farm that 80? And I said, yeah. And he says, well, I'm going to need $2,200 to pay for the seed chemicals. And that was a huge amount at that day. And then I was really baptized into what farming really takes. And you know, coming from a Baptist family, I was brought up not to smoke, drink, chew, or go with girls that do. And and
Why not?
And they said not gambling. And then Dad asked me if I wanted to spend $2,300 to farm, and I said, "Isn't that gambling?" And so we had a good discussion on that. But he said, "The Lord will bless you. You'll always, if you get on task and do the right thing," he says, "you'll be able to make it." So,
Amen for that.
yep.
Wow. So you would probably say that your years of farming, and they're plentiful in number, have been just so amazingly good for you.
They've been good. It's always the weather problems that come along, and then the toughest part was the farm crisis. And I don't think people really realize how tough that was when you have interest in the 1979, 1980 at 18, 19%, and your land is valued at $2,300 an acre, and you're making payments, hope to pay it off. And then within 2 years, you go into the banker, and the banker says, you know, that land is not worth $2,300 an acre. It's worth about $950 an acre right now. And that's just a direct gut check. And you come home, and all of a sudden, your ratios are thrown in a bad way, and the bankers have to watch on how many losses they can take. And so that farm crisis, I hope we never, ever have to go through something like that again.
Oh, I hope so too.
Yep.
Absolutely. But as you said earlier, the Lord will provide.
Correct.
And is always watching out for us.
Yep.
And things turned out okay.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Oh my
There's been some slim years.
Oh, yes, I'm sure.
There's been some. This past year was not a good year because we had so much rain, had double the rainfall when the crops were supposed to go in, but the previous 3 years were really good.
Yes.
And so you just got to look at it long term.
Now, being retired, and maybe I'm using that term loosely for you. Maybe you seem to be quite active. Do you still help with any aspects of the farming?
Well, I'm kind of been turned into the parts man, the gopher.
I see.
And I do a lot of the stuff with seed corn, and Todd helps with the chemicals and that. And it takes a young person like Todd to figure out the GPS, the tractor steering itself across the field, all the electronics. And it seems like as you get older, that is harder to pick up. And so somebody that can sit down and look at it and punch the things in and go to it, I'm all for it. And that's what Todd does.
I still can't understand how a tractor can go by itself across the field.
Yeah, that's correct. And
I just can't. Yeah. I can't fathom it.
You punch that little button, and when you get about 150 feet from the end of the field, there's a bell that comes on in case you're running long hours. and you're coming and you know you've got to turn around the field,
Yes.
or you're being occupied by something else, and then
Yes.
the buzzer will come on and let you know that you're going to be running into a fence or a dredge ditch
Oh my
or
goodness.
something like that, and it'll buzz. And that wakes you up if you're doing that, and then you are alert to that. So it has. I would suspect someday they probably have blood pressure and heartbeat down there someplace along the line. So
Technology, no bounds.
that's right. That's right.
Okay, so let's go to the next stage of your life. So it's quite evident that you have been highly successful as a farmer here in the North Iowa area, particularly Forest City. And you wanted to do some talking about, was it the courthouse? Is that
Yes,
what you wanted
yes.
to mention, sir?
Well, I'll talk about the Winnebago Historical Society.
Yes, please
And
do.
I've been on. That was organized back in about the 1960s. Helen Brown and Eugene Morrison and some of them put together, and then about 2000, I got interested in a book. John Messer from Pinckney Pharmacy called me one day, and he says, "Riley," he says, we're moving out to the hill. We're going through the basement, and we're finding something here, and there's something I think you might like." And I said, "What is it?" He says, "It's a 800-page book, and it's called The History of Winnebago, Kossuth, and Hancock County." And he says, "You're going to like this." So I went down the basement and looked at it, took it home,
Yes.
and reading about everything from 1884 to the founding of Forest City was amazing. When they talk about elk herds, 500 head of elk herds and bears, and the Indians that were in the area, and the settlers that came in, and I couldn't care in the high school about how many wives Henry VIII had, or the world history, but the local history really stuck like Velcro with me, and I enjoyed reading that. And so I was asked to be on the board in 2000, and I've been on there for 25 years. I've been president for about 8 years, and Dan Davis is now the president of it, and it's let me, especially with the Facebook, where we have the Winnebago Historical Society Facebook page, and we have about 6,500 followers.
Oh my goodness.
And it's nice to go into that Facebook and create discussion of history. And from all over the United States, people follow us, and it's just real rewarding for me. And the Winnebago Historical Society has the mansion, but we also have Trinity Lutheran Church and the library, the research library, and then we have Heritage Park. And so we are overseeing all of that, and we have a board that really is working, gets together well. I've never been on a board that has a common goal and to move forward with stuff. And this new vault that we got, we have many people coming in researching their history, and we can show them the things that they need to know. The one other thing that was really influential is the summits. They were in the basement of the summit, and the Mason City Globe had bought the deal, and we worked along with Ray Beebe and contacted the people over there, and luckily we got to bring them up to the mansion. So they're at the vault. They're all contained from 1871 till 2023. They're all there. And then about 5 years ago, we had it was called Read All About It. And we put a word out that we could put all those summits on the web.
Oh my goodness.
And so we put it out on Facebook, and it was going to cost close to $18,000 to do it. And the money came in. And so it's so easy to use that you can go in there and you can put any name on the front line, and then you can put the second line, you put what years you want to look at from 1960 to 1965, and you'll hit search, and every time that name is in the paper in that year span, pops right up. It's highlighted in blue.
Oh, my.
So we have people that use that for obituaries, for research.
Yes.
I use it quite a bit on going back and bringing up things that have happened years ago. And so that has really put roots into our society where people that want to see. I had one guy that was a star in basketball, and he said, I'm so appreciative of that because my grandson's playing basketball out in Virginia, and I send out the ads that when I was in high school, he can see what Grandpa was doing on the basketball court. And so he's following every time Grandpa sends something out, he follows it, and whether it's football or baseball or basketball. So it's reaching out, bringing the community together.
That is phenomenal.
Yep.
My goodness. I'm going to check that out, Riley.
Yep. And it includes speeding tickets, divorces.
Oh boy.
And any other things that you made the paper with. And some people want to know that and some people don't. But it's,
Sure. Oh, my goodness. So can you talk a little bit, Riley, about the actual museum? How did that house become a museum?
Well, the house began as there was a banker in town. His name was Charlie Thompson, and he was very aggressive. And he owned the Summit Hotel, where the Forest City City Hall is right now. He owned the bank, First National Bank, that's on the corner across from the quilt shop in downtown Forest City. And then in 1900, he started that in 1895. And then in 1900, he built the Summit Hotel. And then he also built the Mansion Museum, the Mansion House where it's at.
Of course.
And so that was back in the horse and buggy days. He spent $6,200 to build that huge house. And he had people come in from Chicago. And he was there for about 15 years. And then he moved out. And it's been a series of people. It was into a hotel. Many times there was an insurance shop in there. And so it eventually they had a chance to buy it, got the funds, and then we've done that into converting it back to the way it was, and also showcasing. We have the Terry Branstad Museum that's in there. We have Ida Fuller. We have a really neat Winnebago history of Winnebago upstairs and that, and so. We have a lot of people that come in the summertime to have their Winnebagos fixed, and they don't have anything to do, and they end up coming to the mansion, and we give them a tour, and so that's worked out really well.
That's wonderful. Now, throughout the year, Riley, if somebody wants to have a tour of the museum, how does that work? Is it different for certain times of the year, the hours?
Yeah, we're basically closed right now, but we will have tours, and any Tuesday and Thursday from 1 to 4 p.m. There's usually somebody at the. We might have ladies that are working there, which at one time last week I think we had 5 ladies that were filing and doing stuff and that. So and then when it gets into May, then we open on Sundays from 1 to 4.
I see.
So that's how we usually a Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday are our days of showtime.
Oh my goodness! Well, that is a wonderful place, absolute wonderful place. So, when did the Historical Society acquire Heritage Park? Then can you talk about that?
Yeah, Heritage Park actually is around 2000 or a couple of years before, and there was 3 threshing clubs had their own little shows and that, and some of the organizers said, let's bring them all 3 together, and they went to Winnebago and to John Kay and the foundation, and they had a dream that they could make that into a first-class tourist attraction for people and do it, and so they put the things together, and they had on board, they had Ron Holland, Ron Holland with his house moving, and I think every building south of the jail and the church up there probably was moved in by, including the Beaver Creek Church and the Timberland Museum, and Ron had his ability to do that for donation only. He put a lot of time and a lot of manpower in there.
Wow! And
so they got started, and then we just added on as we go.
Of course, yes. So, focusing on Heritage Park for a little bit, can you talk a little bit about some of the events that are held out there yearly?
Yes, we will start out usually in May with Easter. We have an Easter egg hunt that usually has about 150 kids. Plus, it's wild when they come out there and they go take off across the lawn and picking up stuff. And then we have a in May we have a STEAM school.
Yes,
it holds 70 people, and they come from around the country. Every year, it's a sellout. By this time, it's usually sold out because they want to come. There's 2 classes. There's the beginners, and then advanced. They really focus on safety because these big steam engines with the power and the steam and the containers, they want to make sure everything works good. Then we open up on Wednesdays and Sundays. At the park, we're teamed up with the WIT rally, the tours, so that they will take people on Winnebago tours, and then they'll come down. They'll spend a day while they're working on stuff. We're working on that, and then we get into about pucker brush days.
Yes,
and we have we're open for all the Winnebago people that come to town. That was part of the deal. So we open the gates up, and they come in free of charge or donation, and they get to see what's going on. And then 1st of August, we have our Heritage Days. It's a new name. It's that instead of the Steam Festival, it's going to be Heritage Days.
Okay.
And it's when everything in the park is active, running. You can see everything from threshing to other things in the park. And this year we're adding some kids' activities, which I think will be interesting. And this year we're going to dedicate the new military museum. And we have some special speakers. I think Jack Caputo might be coming back.
Oh, okay.
I talked to him last week, and I said, Jack, there's a lot of people who'd love to see you again. He says, I'd be happy to come down and be a part of that. And we're also working on a Huey helicopter, a live one coming in and landing as a part of that, plus some retro Army vehicles and stuff like that, and just kind of have a nice thank you for those that have served. Operation LZ was 10 years ago, and that was for the Vietnam veterans, and this would be something that would be for the Desert Storm and the Afghan, and just saying for the community to turn out and say thank you to the veterans for what they did. When I was in the military, it was in the paper. You went to basic training, you were in AIT, you come home, and now that's not in the papers. People don't know our veterans have served and been in all these conflicts. They just come in and they blend in, and we think it's a time that they can come and bring their families, bring their kids, see if the helicopter comes, see what the helicopter sit in the seat, see what it looks like. And it was kind of neat after Operation LZ. I know of 4 people that actually enlisted in the military because they were on the tipping edge, whether they wanted to go in or not. And after coming to LZ and seeing the response and the pride of our community and our North Iowa region and the veterans, they enlisted in the Army. My wife had surgery, and I came back into the recovery ward, and I had my hat on.
Yes.
And the lady says, were you part of that? Did you go to that? I say, I sure was. And she says, my daughter went there and was looking at military service, and she said she spent 3 years as a Marine, spent 3 years in the Marines as an MP. And so she said that was kind of the deal that says, I'd like to be a part of that. So it's good to recognize the veterans, and I've always had a soft spot because I saw how the veterans of Vietnam were treated. Some of them have lived with that, and so it's good to appreciate what they've done.
Amen for that, Riley. Yep. Amen, amen, amen. Well, we must be so lucky here at North Iowa, and especially Fort City, to have such a place like Heritage Park.
Yes.
I mean, what a wonderful place to get historical information.
Yes. And we've had people come, and they said there's 3 major shows that have to do with our same venue. Mount Pleasant's a big one, but they have a budget that's overwhelming. They bring in, the high-end entertainment. There's a Rolog, Minnesota, which is another place that does the same thing. And then there's Heritage Park. And everybody says that Heritage Park has the quality of a roundabout museum with all the museums that are there from the old Red Barn to the log cabins that were actually along the Winnebago River.
Yes.
And the Beaver Creek, the 1890
Yes.
church, and Timberland Museum,
Yes.
where has one of the largest arrowhead collections in the state of Iowa there. And the RV Museum, where estimated over $800,000 worth of vehicles in that building. And then the tractor displays, and it's just a real gem. And we're looking at different ways in the future that we might be, I don't know if it's going to happen this year, but we're working on bringing area schools in and having
Great idea.
like an academy, and they'll come in and they'll go to the country school. And teacher will say, we're going to have the boys sit on the left, girls on the right. We're going to say the Pledge of Allegiance. And this is your duties for the day, and she'll have a short geography lesson. So when they leave that country school, they've been there, they'd experience it.
Yes.
And we'll have arrowhead collectors down at the Timberland Museum, and there will be actors at each of the deals, like the log cabin, so the kids can actually talk from a person that looks and sounds like that era. And so when they leave Heritage Park, they will know that the history of our area and have a deeper meaning of it.
Oh, well, I just personally feel, Riley, that our young people today don't have much of a passion for history of any kind.
That's correct.
And I don't know where that changed or why it changed, but I have definitely noticed.
Yes.
That.
Yep. And the older you get, it's just like I said before, you get up in age and you're 30 or 40. It's not, and you can tell by our Facebook cross section of those that are on our Facebook. 60% of them are women, 40% are men,
Okay.
and probably 65 to 70% are over 45 years of age.
That's
Under that, it's pretty scant.
Yes.
Unless you put something in from an annual or something like that. But it just kind of the evolution of as you get older, you appreciate the history, and I think it's true with just life in itself. So
I think so too, Riley. Yes. Now, can you go in a little more detail about your relationship or your dealings with John K. Hansen?
Well, John with Winnebago, and
Yes.
and when it started out, and I've had some conversations with Elliot Cooper and some of that
Yes.
stuff, and some of the examples. He started out, and they were going to bring an industry to town. They raised $50,000 from 208 people in town in different increments.
My God.
And then they got an industry. John thought that the camper industry was good, so they had brought an outfit out from California, and they set up here, and they found out that didn't work too good. And people were putting pressure on them to say, we just spent 50 grand here, and they're not putting the deals out. Well, then Elliot Cooper told me that he got on a DC-3, and he flew over the Rocky Mountains back in 1958. And it was about Buddy Holly, and this was all going on at the same time. And he landed out there, and he walked in, and Elliot was a Marine that was on the beaches of Normandy.
Oh,
And he's
I
a
didn't
big
know
guy.
that.
He was a big guy. And he walked in there, and he says, "Gentlemen, you got $50,000 of our money, and nothing's going on in Forest City. You've closed the door for 3 months. What are you going to do about it?" And so they scrambled. He came back, and he I think he got like $23,000 in all the inventory at the factory, which was down on Forest City Ford. He said he came back to town, and he called John, and he says, "John, it's ours. We have the keys to the deal. Let's go take a look." So they went in to the factory. They opened up the doors, and on the one side there was just the frames with the tires on it, and on the other end there was just about a new trailer that was ready to go out. And he said John came back to the office, and he said, "We got to get that trailer out the back end of the shop here to get cash so that we can start to hire and stuff like that.
Right.
And so he said he came into the office there. The phones were still hooked up. They were the rotary phones.
Yes.
And he had a book of Minneapolis. And he started looking, and here was a car truck dealership in Minneapolis. This was in January, in the cold of the year. He called up, and Elliot said, I watched John, and John came, I've got a deal for you. And he says, we have these pull-type trailers, and we want to market them. We'll give you a good deal. I think the trailer was about $900, and they were selling them for $600. And the guy said, bring it up. So they brought it up to Minneapolis. They put it on the lot, and it sat there, and they thought it probably, 3 months they might sell it or whatever it is. And in about 2 weeks, they got a call back, and the guy goes, it's got a lot of interest, and we did sell the trailer. We need more.
Oh, my God.
And so that's how they did it. And it's like Elliot said, John was good in cold sales, and anybody that lived in Forest City knows that John was a shaker and a mover. And
yes.
sometimes, almost too fast to keep track of it, but he was doing it. And in cold sales, he did that. And that's kind of the way he did his entire life until 1996 when he passed away. I mean, he was pro Forest City.
Yes, he was.
Keep the jobs local. Let's make a better community. Let's make a better North Iowa. And he and Louise were always focused in on that kind of deal. And it continues today with the Winnebago or the Hanson Foundation.
Yes.
Of pumping that kind of money back into our communities. And so that was the beginning of Winnebago and Forest City history. Never turned around and looked back. It just kept going. So
fascinating. I'm sure there are very few people who know that information.
Yeah, and Elliot Cooper told me, he says that one of the best days in his life was when he paid back the $50,000 to the people in the community. Because he says, I went to church, I played golf, I was with them people, and they always said, you got my $300 or you got my $500, what are you doing with it? And so he said it was a good deal. Elliot told another deal of John liked airplanes. He really had a passion for airplanes, and he said that they had a Beechcraft Bonanza, which was, I think, a four-place plane, and he said they had a meeting one day when Winnebago was going there, and he said, we need a bigger plane. We need a plane that can haul 8 people so we can get around to do that. And he said, just by chance, he says, I have a plane like that at the Forest City Airport right now. Oh. And Elliot said, well, that kind of surprised us. And he says, I'd like to have you guys go down and take a look at this plane. And so Elliot said, we got in our cars and went down there, and there was probably maybe 6 or 8 of them, and here was this beautiful plane, had chrome blades on it, just a beautiful plane. And so Elliot said we started to look it over and thinking it was just a, should we do this or not? And he says, I popped up in the back door and opened up the back door. And I looked down the seat, and here was the flight manual, the instruction manuals, and on top of it was a sales receipt already sold to Winnebago, over $400,000. And he says he'd already got, of course, he had the cash to do it. And he said, we didn't argue. That's where he was going, and we knew how he operated. And so he said that's how John made things grow, and that's how we got Winnebago today. So
unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yes, he was such an instrumental part in the growth of this city.
Yep.
Oh my gosh, that's Winnebago is just, the whole story is absolutely fascinating to hear.
And I've had different guys that I've asked to write memoirs. With Winnebago, and I have them at my home, and at the proper time, they will be released, and people can read about some of the things, good and bad, from inside of Winnebago. And I think it'll be pretty interesting to see how his management style and how he moved forward and dealing with all these Chrysler, Ford, a lot of big shots that were in Forest City, and how he dealt with them and that. And so it's pretty interesting.
Oh, it's got to be. Wow. Well, that sounds like some really good reading.
Yeah, it will be. Yeah.
Any idea when that will be?
No,
okay.
I'm still I'm collecting stuff from
Yes.
people like Don Snyder at Manufacturers Bank.
Right.
Working with John Hansen. What
Right.
was that like? And
Yes.
and so kind of filling in the edges a little bit of saying this was what he was like. This was his motivation, and he went through just like with the farm crisis. He had a lot of crises there through the years with the oil production and everything else, and he still came out on top.
He did.
Yeah,
He did. Maybe his life should be a musical, Riley.
that could be.
Why not?
Yeah,
Lots of other people, entrepreneurs of. Anyway,
yeah.
just wanted to add a little light to the story here. So, excuse me. So, Riley, can you tell us a little bit about the courthouse here in town?
Okay.
Yes, sir.
The first courthouse was built right after about 1857, and as the county grew, they needed to have government services and that. And after the war was over, and the trains came to town, the first train came in 1879. And people were coming in that were migrating in, just like our family was coming and doing that. And so they needed a bigger courthouse. And so they were discussing about taking the little courthouse down, which was just where the memorial bandstand is right now. It's a small 2-story building. Okay. And so they said, we need to go big time. And so the word got around kind of that as the county was migrating, Lake Mills thought that we should move the center of the county to Lake Mills, and so they had gone up and they'd taken a boat, had gotten people to sign a signature to saying that we would like to have it in Lake Mills, and the word got around Forest City and the supervisors. And they saw that happening, and so then they went and they got a corresponding survey and brought that to the supervisors, and there was more people signing the surveys than there was people in Winnebago County. They could see that there was some people that were signing twice and 3 times. So at a meeting in 1896. They had a meeting, and some of the businessmen in Forest City wanted the courthouse to be in Forest City, and they came to the supervisors committee when they had a meeting, and they said, we want the courthouse to be in Forest City. We've had the vote here, and we will deposit $20,000 cash that the county can build the courthouse with. And it's at no cost to the taxpayers. We will take care of it. We'll do it. And they said the discussion lasted about a half hour, and they said, we'll do it. So they got it, established it in Forest City, and it was the courthouse built it was $20,496 to build it.
Okay.
The difference about this thing is that they met with the architects the 1st of June in 1896. They had 6 firms that were all vying to build the building, and they picked out one, and I think they were from Minneapolis, and they got things in motion, and they started building the courthouse. And the amazing part about it is that in the papers it says that in January of 1897, the courthouse was open for business. Now let's go back and think about this. That huge 3-story building,
yes,
that was built from June, the end of June, July, all the way up to January, 6 months, 7 months. They estimated there was 375,000 bricks in that building. All of it there was no backhoes, there was no excavators. It was all done by hand, and the cement and everything. There was some firms in Forest City that made bricks, so they got some of them. Some of the bigger bricks on the bottom came from Indiana by train.
Oh my!
So if you can imagine that coming in by train to the depot, down by the elevator,
yes,
and then those bricks had to be offloaded and pulled up to the courthouse by horses.
Oh my gosh.
And then it had to be unloaded and put in place. And so they completed that courthouse. The only injury
Yes.
that was done is that somebody was using a wheelbarrow and was hauling mortar cement across a plank, and the plank broke and it went down, and one guy had his arm injured from the fall. But other than that, to think of that huge, and it's still standing today. It's still standing today, which is almost 130 years.
Yes.
And it's still doing its job. And I think people appreciate history. Go into the courthouse and just look around. There's 7 safes in the courthouse, and it still has a lot of stuff that was left from the original courthouse.
Yes.
So, and the courthouse in those early days was used. They had church services in it.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And they on the front they had our God and the flag upstairs where the courtroom was. When World War I broke out, the word got out. Of course, there's no radios and that, by paper and that. And when the word hit, they actually had filled the top end of the courthouse with people that were in support of men going to World War I. And so it's quite an amazing feat. And when you come into Forest City, when these ragby riders come into Forest City, and I've done that when we've traveled, I get off the interstates and I'll go through towns and look. And the first impression they're going to get of Forest City, it's military conscious.
Yes.
When you see the courthouse with the tank and the cannon and the memorials and the soldier on the water fountain, it's pretty impressive to see that here in the middle of the plains. We have no Fort Snelling. We have no Fort Leonard Wood. We have no Offutt Air Force Base. We're just out here in the middle, but we love our military, and it shows.
You do. Absolutely. Yes. Well, that is an amazing structure.
Yeah, it is.
It truly, truly is.
Yep.
And hope it has a long life ahead of it.
I thought it was pretty neat, Scott.
Yes.
About 10 years ago, 11 years ago, we had pucker brush. And we were having our chicken dinner, and we were sitting over by the fountain.
Yes.
And we were sitting there and just finishing up, and we saw this kid go into the fountain, and he started splashing water. And then there was a Hispanic kid that came along, and he thought that was fun, so he jumped in. And then there was a black kid from the WIT travel that he came, and they got in the water together. And those 3 kids were splashing and having a good time. And when you look up at that soldier, and I thought, if I ever had a camera, I should have had it now, but I didn't. But what that recognized to me was that there was different people from different areas, different colors, and that soldier was giving them the protection of the freedom while they were down splashing waters. And it was just kind of one of them things that I just kind of nudged my wife and said, look at that. Can you see? Can you see what's going on there? There's a picture of America right there on the courthouse square.
Very symbolic.
Yes.
Oh, what a wonderful memory to have, Riley.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
And just to know that we have that protection is so important.
Correct. Yep, it is,
Yes.
and it was so evident that day. So but I didn't have my camera, so I couldn't take it. Otherwise, I could have gone a long ways with that picture. So.
I bet you could have.
And the dads and the parents just sat there, and they were having a good time. There was not a problem. Everybody was. This is what America's about.
So, if somebody listening today, Riley, wanted to find a smaller community to move to, what would you say would be all the advantages of choosing the Forest City area to live?
Well, I put it this way. Forest City is small enough not to be big and big enough not to be small.
That's a wonderful way of putting it.
And I've followed that saying all the way along, is that it has opportunities. You can go to be educated here. You've got a 4-year university that you can just follow through that caters to Forest City people.
Yes.
You have work opportunities. It's kind of like you can start here, and I go back and say that. John Hanson graduated from Forest City High School. Terry Branstad graduated from Forest City High School. Eldine Borg, instrumental with the Iowa Public Forest City High School, and we've talked about that and saying a good saying for Forest City is start here, go anywhere.
Yes.
And that's the opportunities of Forest City. You go to church on Sunday, and the parking lots have cars in them. They're still, they're still doing that. Education, sports activity. Who in the world would think of a town of 4,000 with a YMCA?
Oh, I agree.
I mean, that's impressive when people come along and say, you have that here in this little town. And so, we have very, very lots of opportunity. Pilot Knob, you want to get away from, and I saw one deal that people like to be in towns where there's water, river. We have a river going through, and now they're going to be redoing some of the recreational, and then to go out to Pilot Knob and the trails, get away from it and just go out there in the fall where it's beautiful. There's a lot of packed into this community.
There is, and
people sometimes don't realize all those benefits that, when you've been here for 70 years, you take it for granted.
I guess so.
But then you go out there and go to the top of the knob and see seven cities and Forest City's kind of been one. Give us a lemon and we'll make a lemonade out of it. And so
I like that. Yeah. That's really good. Now, I also wanted to mention, and I'm not trying to trump what you had to say, but the Bowman Fine Arts Center.
Yes.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
A community this size, very much like with the Y. Who would have thunk it?
Yep. And the new educational NIAC Center down by.
Oh, yes.
And my grandson is down there, and he's into motors and welding and stuff like that, and he's getting college.
He is
education there right here in Forest City is because John V. Hansen decided that he wanted to do something for Forest City, and so it's they put their money back in the community, and it's really shows with the quality of life.
It sure does. Well, speaking of quality of life, Riley, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming on to talk about this wonderful community that we live in.
Well, it's easy to talk about once you've been here. And the nice thing about it is when you come here, everything is done for you. If you're new to the community, the churches are established and running. The school is established and running and has good leadership and physical responsibility.
Yes.
And the county, and it's all set to come in, and people welcome you and be a part. And like I say, it's one of them things where, the bigness can be relative in many ways. And it's what you make out of it to be a part of that community. So
yes. Well, thank you for taking time out to share with us all this wonderful historical information.
Thank you very much, Scott.
You are so welcome, Riley, and I feel like I could have you on as a regular guest. I bet you've got way more information in that noggin going on there, Riley.
Well, there's murders and there's all kinds of stuff that we can talk about. So, anytime you want me back, I'll work it in.
Well, you're coming back now, Riley, because you said murder. So
okay.
I want to hear about that.
Okay.
And I think my listeners might be too. Okay. So anyway, folks, I'm so glad that you took time out of your schedule to belly up to the table with Riley Lewis. And you must be highly satisfied with everything that you have learned. But there may be a sequel. So keep that in mind. And I hope that the road of life is fun for you and enjoyable. And if you're living in the North Iowa area, appreciate what we got here. All right. Bye-bye, folks. Take care.
For more information about the Winnebago County Historical Society, the Mansion Museum, Heritage Park of North Iowa, the Librand Whitus Historical Center, the Hall of Heroes, or any of the Winnebago County Historical Society's events, simply follow the link in the show notes. Get to know our history. You may just learn some things about yourself. Become a member, volunteer, and donate using the link in the show notes. Mr. B's Dinner Party is hosted by Scott Bertelson, edited and produced by Troy Thompson, recorded and distributed at Sunnyside Farm Studios. Music is provided by Soundstripe and platformed by Buzzsprout. Like our page on Facebook, subscribe so you never miss an episode, and share with your friends. Listen and enjoy every other Wednesday, conversational morsels for the mind on Mr. B's Dinner Party.